The phone chimed at 6:37 p.m. My wife's name flashed across the screen. I'm going to Miami with my ex for a week. Don't be jealous. I called First National Bank. Half of our joint savings frozen, transferred to my name. Credit cards canceled, new ones issued. I gathered evidence, presented it in court. A few days later, my wife realized she made the mistake.
The text arrived at 6:37 p.m. on a Wednesday, at that ordinary hour when life is supposed to feel predictable. I was standing at the stove in our kitchen, slowly stirring pasta sauce, while steam curled upward in lazy spirals. At the dining table, Sophie, my 6-year-old daughter, sat with her legs tucked beneath her chair, tongue pressed against her lip in fierce concentration as she colored inside the lines of a princess castle. The soft chime of my phone broke the quiet domestic rhythm. I reached for it automatically, expecting a routine interruption, an email from work perhaps, or a message from my sister about weekend plans. Instead, I saw Rachel's name. I'm going to Miami with Lucas for a week. Don't be jealous. I need a break. Take care of Sophie. Lucas, her college boyfriend, the man she'd assured me repeatedly and emphatically was ancient history. The man she'd described as just a friend when I'd questioned late-night messages 3 months earlier. The wooden spoon in my hand froze mid-stir. A cold, dense weight settled in my chest, heavy as iron, yet my face remained composed. Years spent navigating high-stakes business negotiations had conditioned me to conceal emotional impact instantly. Reaction was a liability, composure was power. "Daddy, is dinner ready?" Sophie called, still focused on her coloring. "5 more minutes, sweetheart," I replied evenly. I placed the phone face down on the counter and resumed stirring. The motion became mechanical, circle the edges, keep the sauce from sticking, maintain control. But inside, everything accelerated. Rachel had left that morning carrying an overnight bag. She'd kissed my cheek lightly and said she was flying to Houston to help her sister through a workplace crisis. She'd sounded tired but sincere. I had believed her without hesitation. 10 years of marriage had trained me to do so. 10 years, a daughter, a carefully restored Tudor-style home in one of Austin's most coveted neighborhoods, dinner parties, shared investments, retirement plans, trust layered and reinforced over a decade. And now, dismantled by 17 casually typed words, I served Sophie dinner and sat across from her, nodding attentively as she recounted playground politics and spelling quizzes. I smiled at appropriate moments, asked gentle questions, and maintained the illusion of normalcy. Meanwhile, another part of my mind began structuring a response, not impulsively, not emotionally, but methodically. Strategy had always been my profession. Now it would be my protection. That night, when I tucked Sophie into bed, she wrapped her arms around my neck and whispered, "I love you, Daddy. You're the best daddy in the whole world." Her trust struck deeper than the message ever could. For a moment, my composure faltered. I held her longer than usual, breathing in the soft scent of strawberry shampoo, memorizing the warmth of her small frame. This was what had been risked. This was what had been treated as expendable. "I love you too," I managed quietly, more than anything. After she drifted to sleep, I remained in the doorway, watching her peaceful expression illuminated by the gentle glow of her nightlight. The hurt inside me did not fade, it hardened. It crystallized into resolve. Back in the bedroom, I composed a reply to Rachel. "Understood. Sophie and I will be fine. Enjoy yourself." Then I made a phone call. Robert Kane answered on the third ring. We had been roommates in college before life separated our paths. He into family law, I into corporate consulting. Over the years, he had earned a formidable reputation in Austin's legal community. They called him the Shark. "John, it's almost midnight," he said, instantly alert. "Everything okay? I need to see you, now." A brief pause. My office, 30 minutes. The drive through Austin's quiet streets felt surreal. Memories surfaced uninvited, vivid, and relentless. Our first date at a downtown Italian restaurant, where Rachel laughed so hard wine nearly escaped her nose. The botanical garden proposal, where she trembled before saying yes. The exhausted radiance on her face when she first held Sophie. Were those moments genuine, or had something eroded gradually, unnoticed, until collapse was inevitable? I refused to dwell in speculation. Emotion clouded judgment. Each memory became reinforcement, not of loss, but of clarity. By the time I reached Robert's office building, I was composed and certain. He was waiting in the lobby, dressed in jeans and a worn University of Texas t-shirt, key card in hand. His casual appearance contrasted sharply with the precision of his professional reputation. "You look terrible," he observed as we rode the elevator. "Rachel's having an affair," I said simply. "She texted me from Miami." "She's with her ex," his expression sharpened. "She put that in writing." I handed him my phone. He read the message slowly, then looked up with a faint, predatory smile. "She actually documented it," he murmured. Reasonable, we walked to his office in silence. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Austin's illuminated skyline, but my attention remained fixed inward. What outcome do you want? Robert asked once we were seated. Reconciliation, separation, negotiation. I want everything, I replied evenly. Full custody of Sophie, protection of my assets, the house, and I want clarity, legal, financial, final. He studied me carefully. That's ambitious. Texas is a no-fault state, Robert explained, his voice measured, professional. Infidelity alone won't determine custody or asset division. Unless we can demonstrate that her behavior directly harms your daughter, the court will view this as a marital breakdown, not misconduct. Then we prove harm, I said, cutting in before he could elaborate. We gather evidence, we document everything, and we move quickly. Rachel believes I'm predictable, reliable, the husband who will be waiting patiently when she returns from her little escape. She's never watched me negotiate when millions of dollars are at stake. She has no idea what I'm capable of when something important is threatened. Robert studied me for a moment, then gave a small nod. For the next 2 hours, we built a strategy with clinical precision. He placed calls to colleagues, despite the late hour, financial specialists, investigators, a family court consultant. By the time I left his office, the first pieces of a long and calculated process had already begun to move. Driving home through the empty Austin streets, the city felt unusually silent, as though holding its breath. Halfway there, grief struck with a force I hadn't anticipated. My vision blurred. I pulled the car to the side of the road, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles whitened. Tears came without permission, without warning. For 10 full minutes, I allowed the pain to exist, without resistance. The loss of a marriage, the fracture of trust, the collapse of a shared life, it all demanded acknowledgement. When the storm passed, I wiped my face, inhaled deeply, and made a quiet promise to myself. That would be the last moment of helplessness. From this point forward, every action would be deliberate. It was nearly 3 in the morning when I stepped into the house. My house now, though the distinction still felt unreal. The entryway walls were lined with framed photographs, curated memories of a life that had once seemed stable. Rachel and I smiling beneath the sun in Greece. Sophie perched between us at her 4th birthday party, frosting smeared across her cheeks. Rachel in cap and gown, triumphant after earning her master's degree, Sophie and I standing proudly at her side. One by one, I removed each frame. Carefully, methodically, I slid Rachel's photographs out and set them aside. I replaced them with images of Sophie alone, or Sophie with me. It was not an act of anger, so much as an act of preservation. I needed clarity, not nostalgia. The woman in those photographs no longer existed, or perhaps never had in the way I believed. Thursday morning, I called in sick to work, for the first time in 3 years. After dropping Sophie at school, I began a series of appointments that would have seemed unthinkable just days earlier. At First National Bank, Patricia Mitchell, the private banker who had helped us build our financial foundation, looked visibly uneasy when I requested to freeze our joint accounts. "Mr. Morgan," she said carefully, "may I ask what prompted these changes?" I slid my phone across her desk. The message from Rachel glowed plainly on the screen. "My wife is in Miami with another man," I said quietly. "I need to protect my finances before they become vacation funding." Patricia's expression shifted from discomfort to sympathetic resolve. She had known us as a successful couple, had celebrated our milestones alongside us. Now she nodded briskly and turned to her computer. "We'll establish new accounts in your name immediately," she said. "I can expedite everything." Her voice softened. "I'm very sorry." "You always seemed happy." "That's the nature of appearances," I replied. "They're easiest to maintain when only one person knows they're false." By early afternoon, half of our joint savings had been transferred into an individual account, a move entirely within legal bounds. Joint credit cards were frozen. New cards were issued in my name alone. Beneficiary designations on insurance policies and retirement accounts were revised. Each signature felt less like an administrative task and more like reclaiming ground that had quietly eroded over time. At one point, my phone buzzed. A new message from Rachel appeared. "Having dinner at that seafood place you always wanted to try. Wish you were here. Give Sophie a kiss from me." The casual tone of it stunned me. She framed betrayal as leisure, absence as indulgence. I showed the message to the bank manager handling my final request. He shook his head before processing the cancellation of her credit privileges with renewed urgency. Later that afternoon, I met with Ethan Cross, the private investigator Robert had recommended. His office sat above a convenience store, cluttered with filing cabinets and aging equipment. He listened attentively as I explained the situation. "Miami isn't difficult," Ethan said, jotting notes. "You have the hotel name, the Four Seasons." She texted her sister the details. She assumed Sandra would cover for her. Instead, Sandra called me confused. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. We'll obtain photographs, timestamps, documentation, enough to establish a clear timeline of conduct. I need everything, I said. Locations, activities. Any evidence demonstrating she prioritized this relationship over her responsibilities as a parent. What about the other man? Ethan asked. Lucas Mercer, Chief Financial Officer for Hayes Medical Group. Married to the company's CEO. They live in Dallas. Ethan let out a low whistle. That adds layers. I'll investigate both of them. He studied me carefully before closing his notebook. Most clients who walk in here are emotional. They want confirmation, then they fall apart. You're different. How so? You already decided what comes next. You're not seeking clarity, you're building a case. I offered no response. Just gather the information. Leaving his office, I experienced an unexpected sense of steadiness. Shock had transformed into direction. For years, I had invested energy into maintaining a partnership I believed was mutual. Now that same focus had a single purpose: protection of my daughter, my future, and my sense of self. That evening, when I picked Sophie up from school, she climbed into the back seat and asked the question I had been quietly anticipating. When is Mommy coming home? I lowered myself to her height in the school parking lot, knees bending until we were eye to eye. Sophie's small backpack hung from one shoulder, and her fingers clutched the strap as though holding on to something steady. Her gaze was open and trusting, untouched by the complicated truths adults carried. Mommy is on a trip right now, I said gently. She'll be gone for a little while. She always calls me before bedtime when she's away, Sophie added, searching my face for reassurance. The words pressed into my chest with quiet force. Rachel had not called once since she left. Not to check on Sophie, not to ask how school had gone, not even a brief message to say goodnight. I'm sure she'll call soon, I said, forcing calm into my voice, even as the lie left a bitter taste behind. Protecting Sophie from disappointment felt more urgent than protecting myself from guilt. How about we stop for ice cream on the way home? I offered. Her face brightened instantly, concern dissolving with the effortless resilience of childhood. She nodded eagerly, already describing which flavor she wanted. Watching her mood shift so quickly made something ache inside me. If only adult heartbreak could be soothed with sweetness and distraction. That night, after Sophie drifted into sleep, I sat alone in the kitchen. A glass of bourbon rested in my hand, its amber surface catching the soft overhead light. The house felt unfamiliar in its quietness. Rachel had always filled it with movement, music playing in the background, friends stopping by unannounced, conversations layered over one another. Now there was only stillness and the echo of absence. My phone rang. Rachel's mother's name appeared on the screen. I stared at it for a moment before answering. John, is everything all right? Ellen Reynolds' voice carried both warmth and concern. I've been trying to reach Rachel, but she isn't answering. Ellen had always treated me with genuine kindness, welcoming me into her family without reservation. The thought of hurting her with the truth made my throat tighten. Rachel's taking some time away, I said carefully. She's fine, just unavailable at the moment. Away, Ellen repeated, but she told me she was helping Sandra through some crisis at work. Sandra says she hasn't seen her in weeks. John, what's going on? The fragile structure of Rachel's story was already collapsing under its own carelessness. She hadn't even ensured her sister would support the lie. I think you should speak with Rachel directly when she returns, I replied, choosing distance over revelation. A pause followed, heavy with unspoken understanding. Is she with Lucas again? Ellen's voice hardened, the warmth replaced by something colder. The question struck like an unexpected blow. This has happened before, she continued quietly. Thomas and I warned her after college. There was an incident. We thought it was over. She told us she had chosen you. Silence settled between us, thick and undeniable. I need to go, Ellen, I said at last, my tone steady despite the turmoil beneath it. I'll have Rachel call you when I hear from her. I ended the call before she could respond, lowering the phone slowly to the table. The revelation reshaped everything. This was not a sudden lapse in judgment. It was a pattern, a history concealed behind selective honesty. I poured another glass of bourbon, heavier this time. Pieces of the past rearranged themselves with unsettling clarity. Rachel's defensiveness whenever Lucas's name surfaced, her emphatic insistence that nothing remained between them. The intensity of her denials now appeared less like reassurance and more like strategy, understanding. The marriage I believed secure had rested on an incomplete truth. Any hesitation about my course of action dissolved completely. I was not acting out of vengeance. I was responding to reality, with clarity I should have demanded long ago. By Friday morning, Ethan had delivered his report. My phone vibrated repeatedly while I prepared breakfast for Sophie. Want to see Mickey Mouse pancakes, Daddy? She asked, leaning on the counter, eyes bright with anticipation. Absolutely, I said, slipping the phone into my pocket. Evidence could wait, my daughter could not. After dropping Sophie at school, I pulled into a quiet parking lot and opened the messages. My hands trembled slightly as I began to scroll. Photographs appeared, one after another. Rachel beside Lucas at the hotel pool, her hand resting casually on his leg. The two of them seated across from each other at dinner, their heads inclined in intimate conversation. Rachel laughing in the hotel lobby, Lucas's arm around her waist. Each image carried a timestamp. One photograph captured them dining at 8:30 p.m., precisely when Rachel once insisted on being present for Sophie's bedtime routine. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Then came the video. Rachel sat in a hotel bar, her posture relaxed, her laughter unrestrained. One arm draped loosely around Lucas's shoulders while she raised a martini glass. "To freedom," she said, her voice light with amusement, "and to husbands who don't ask questions." Lucas leaned closer. "You could leave him, you know, we could do this properly." Her expression shifted slightly, calculating rather than emotional. "It's complicated," she said. "There's Sophie, the house finances. John controls everything. He's safe, dependable, he'll always be there." Lucas feigned offense. Rachel responded with a kiss, unhurried and deliberate. The video ended. I remained seated, unable to move, her words echoing with relentless precision. Safe, dependable, always there. In her narrative, I was not a partner but a constant, a structure she relied on while pursuing something else. I forwarded the files to Robert and called him immediately. "I've reviewed everything," he said without preamble. "This is strong evidence. The judge assigned to your case places significant emphasis on parental responsibility. Rachel prioritizing a romantic engagement over her child's routine is compelling." "What happens next?" I asked. "I've filed for emergency temporary custody," he replied. "The hearing is Monday morning. Judge Harriet Wilson will preside. She is measured but traditional in her interpretation of parental obligations. These materials support our position." "She didn't abandon Sophie," I said instinctively. "I'm here, legally," Robert explained. "She left her child without appropriate arrangements while engaging in an extramarital relationship. She relied on you to assume full responsibility. That is the framework we will present." After ending the call, I remained in the parked car, watching families move through the nearby park. Parents pushed children on swings. Couples walked side by side, absorbed in ordinary conversation. The simplicity of their moments contrasted sharply with the upheaval reshaping my own life. One final decision remained. The headquarters of Hayes Medical Group rose prominently against the Dallas skyline, its glass exterior reflecting the midday sun with clinical precision. I had made the 3-hour drive from Austin immediately after arranging for my parents to pick Sophie up from school and keep her with them for the weekend. To them, I described it as an urgent business obligation that required my presence out of town. I had not told them about Rachel, not yet. That conversation carried too much weight to be rushed through over a hurried phone call or explained between logistics and reassurances. It would require time, clarity, and a steadiness I was still assembling within myself. Before leaving, I contacted Olivia Hayes' office, leveraging the credibility of my consulting firm to request a direct meeting. Her assistant had been polite but firm at first, explaining that Olivia's schedule was filled months in advance and that new appointments were rarely accommodated without extraordinary justification. I chose my words carefully, hinting at potential regulatory complications that could impact an upcoming product rollout for her company. The implication alone proved sufficient. By late morning, I had secured a meeting for 2:00 p.m. during the drive north. Rachel called 3 times. Each time, I allowed the call to ring through unanswered, watching her name flash across the dashboard display before fading into silence. I stopped at a rest area halfway to Dallas and listened to the voicemails in order, standing beside the car while the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the pavement. "John, my credit card was declined at dinner last night. Can you check what's going on?" Her voice held mild irritation, not concern. "John, I just tried to pay for a spa treatment and none of our cards are working. Something's wrong." "Call me back." The irritation sharpened, edged with impatience. "John, what the hell is happening? I can't access our accounts online. If this is some kind of joke, it's not funny." There was no mention of Sophie. No question about how we were managing. No acknowledgement of absence, responsibility, or consequence. Only inconvenience and anger directed toward disruption. I deleted the messages without responding and returned to the road. Olivia's office suite occupied the entire top floor of a glass and steel structure overlooking downtown Dallas. The building's interior conveyed wealth without excess, precise lines, muted tones, controlled lighting. Her assistant, a sharply dressed young man with a guarded expression, escorted me through a sequence of increasingly refined reception areas before stopping outside a set of double doors. Mr. Morgan for Mrs. Hayes, he announced, stepping aside. The woman seated behind the expansive desk was not what I had anticipated. Her reputation suggested severity, perhaps age, someone visibly hardened by years of executive authority. Instead, she appeared to be in her early 40s. Her dark hair was cut with geometric precision, framing a composed, angular face. She wore a simple black dress of impeccable tailoring, unadorned except for a wedding band and understated diamond studs. Her composure suggested restraint rather than warmth. She looked up from her computer with a polite, practiced smile. "Mr. Morgan, you've come from Austin with concerns about regulatory compliance." Her voice was even controlled. "No, Mrs. Hayes," I said. "I've come regarding your husband." The shift in her expression was subtle but unmistakable. The smile vanished, replaced by focused attention sharpened to a point. "Explain," she said. I placed my phone on her desk and opened the images. "This is your husband in Miami with my wife." She examined the photographs in silence, swiping through them with deliberate calm. Her expression did not fracture, but a slight tightening around her eyes revealed concentration rather than indifference. After viewing each image carefully, she set the phone down and met my gaze. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I believe you deserve to know," I said, "and because I believe we may have aligned interests." She leaned back in her chair, studying me with clinical scrutiny. "Aligned in what way?" "I intend to pursue custody of my daughter," I replied. "I intend to protect my home and my future, and I suspect you may have objectives of your own concerning your husband." Silence followed. It stretched long enough to become deliberate rather than incidental. Finally, she pressed a button on her desk phone. "Thomas, cancel the remainder of my meetings today. Have legal send up Lucas's employment contingency files immediately." She released the button and returned her attention to me. "Tell me everything," she said. "Start with your full name and explain why I should not assume these images are fabricated." For the next hour, I outlined the sequence of events with precision. I showed her the messages Rachel had sent, described the false explanation about visiting her sister, and detailed each step I had taken since learning the truth. Olivia listened without interruption, her posture unchanged, her attention unwavering. When I finished, she rose and walked to the window overlooking the city below. "Lucas signed a prenuptial agreement containing an infidelity clause," she said at last. "It is comprehensive. If triggered, he forfeits his position, his equity, and his access to family resources." She turned toward me again. "But the clause requires indisputable proof, evidence that withstands scrutiny." I played the video recorded in the hotel bar. She watched without comment, then requested that it be played again. During the second viewing, her composure hardened perceptibly. When the recording ended, she spoke quietly. "That will suffice." She returned to her desk and lifted the phone again. "I have an alternative approach," she said. She dialed without consulting a directory. "Marcus, prepare the jet. I will depart for Miami tonight. Assemble the security team and ensure the technical equipment is ready." She listened briefly before ending the call. Her gaze returned to me level and direct. "Do you intend to defeat them legally?" she asked, "or dismantle them entirely?" "I intend to pursue justice," I answered. "Justice," she repeated, the word carrying a trace of measured amusement. "A flexible concept. I prefer clarity. They violated agreements knowingly. Consequences follow." She wrote a number on a business card and handed it to me. "This is my direct line. Return to your daughter. By Monday morning, you will have what you require for your custody hearing." She paused, and a faint, controlled smile appeared. "And Lucas will fully comprehend what he has relinquished." As I rose to leave, she spoke again. "Your wife values what most?" I considered the question carefully. "Her reputation," I said, "her social standing." "The appearance of perfection." Olivia nodded once. "Then those elements will be addressed." She extended her hand. Her grip was firm, precise. "It has been a productive meeting, Mr. Morgan." I left her office carrying a sense of unease that settled gradually, like a shadow lengthening at dusk. I had initiated a process whose scale I could no longer measure. The alignment of our interests had created momentum beyond personal grievance or legal strategy. As I walked toward the elevator, the realization settled with quiet certainty. I had set forces in motion whose reach extended far beyond my original intention. As I drove back toward Austin, the road stretching ahead in long, unbroken lines of asphalt, Rachel's words replayed with relentless clarity. "Don't be jealous." The casual dismissal, the arrogance embedded in that single sentence, echoed alongside the video clip in which she'd laughed and said, "He'll always be there." The memory did not ignite rage so much as it solidified something colder, more permanent. She had made her decision with confidence, believing stability was something she could leave and reclaim at will. That illusion had ended. Choices carried weight, consequences followed inevitably. There was no longer any space for hesitation. Saturday morning, I took Sophie to the zoo. The day unfolded with an almost deliberate brightness, as though the world had decided to present itself in vivid contrast to the turmoil beneath the surface of my life. We stood together at the sea lion exhibit, watching sleek bodies slice through the water before launching onto sunlit platforms in choreographed arcs. Sophie clapped with unrestrained delight, her laughter ringing clear, unburdened. Later, we fed giraffes, their impossibly long tongues curling around leaves from her small, outstretched palm. She shrieked with a mixture of awe and disbelief each time one bent low enough for her to reach. We ate ice cream that was far too expensive and melted far too quickly, dripping over our fingers and onto our shoes. She insisted on showing me every animal enclosure, narrating observations with the seriousness of a seasoned explorer. I took photograph after photograph, her bright smile, her curious gaze, her wonder preserved in still frames, evidence of presence, evidence of commitment, evidence of a father who showed up. My phone vibrated intermittently in my pocket, brief pulses of information from Robert and Ethan. I ignored each one. There would be time for strategy later. That day belonged entirely to Sophie. "Daddy," she asked quietly as we stood near the elephant enclosure, watching the massive animals spray arcs of water over their backs. "Why doesn't Mommy call me at bedtime, like she always does when she's away?" The question pierced through layers of careful composure more effectively than any accusation could have. I knelt beside her, lowering myself to meet her steady, searching gaze. She was not asking casually. She was seeking reassurance, trying to reconcile absence with expectation. "I think Mommy has been very busy," I said slowly, choosing words with care. I hesitated, unwilling to repeat the lie about her visiting Sandra, unwilling to build another fragile story that would eventually collapse. Sometimes when grown-ups travel, they get caught up in things and forget to call. Her brow creased slightly, confusion mingling with disappointment. "But Mommy always says I'm the most important thing in her whole world," she said. More important than anything. Children had a way of stripping away pretense, reducing adult complexity to its essential truth. I felt the weight of that truth settle heavily within me. "You are the most important thing, Sophie," I said gently, "to both of us. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, but that doesn't change how much we love you." She nodded, accepting the explanation with the quiet resilience that children often display. Yet as we continued through the exhibits, I noticed subtle changes. Her excitement was more subdued. Each time my phone vibrated, her eyes flicked toward it instinctively, hopeful, waiting. That evening, after my parents picked her up for a sleepover, I finally reviewed the messages I had ignored throughout the day. Rachel's texts had shifted in tone. What began as irritation had evolved into urgency, then desperation. "John, this isn't funny anymore. The hotel is threatening to involve security if I can't settle the bill. I tried calling my parents, but they aren't answering. I need you to transfer money now." I read each message without replying. Ethan had forwarded new photographs. Rachel standing in the hotel lobby, her posture tense, her expression strained. Lucas speaking sharply into his phone, agitation evident even in still images. Rachel seated alone at the bar, repeatedly checking her phone, isolation replacing earlier confidence. Then there was a message from Olivia. "Phase 1 complete. Your wife currently has no financial access." Lucas is addressing unexpected professional developments. They are beginning to understand consequence. More tomorrow. I poured a measured glass of bourbon and stepped onto the back patio. The evening sky unfurled in gradients of orange and deepening violet, light dissolving slowly into dusk. The house behind me felt different, quieter, emptier, yet strangely steadier. 10 years with Rachel. A decade shaped by shared plans, negotiated compromises, accumulated memories. I wondered whether there had been moments when the trajectory could have changed, subtle warnings dismissed, inconsistencies explained away. The late-night messages she laughed off, the extended business trips, the sudden shifts in routine. Perhaps the signs had been present, yet trust, by its nature, does not coexist comfortably with constant suspicion. I had believed because belief was foundational to partnership. My phone rang. Rachel's name illuminated the screen. I watched the device vibrate against the patio table, the sound persistent, insistent. I did not answer. Whatever urgency she now felt was the product of her own decisions. She had stepped away from responsibility without hesitation. Now she faced the absence of rescue. Later that night, Olivia called. "It is done," she said without preamble. "Lucas has been terminated. His company vehicle has been repossessed. Financial access suspended. The hotel has implemented payment restrictions." Her tone remained composed, clinical. "How was that accomplished over a weekend?" I asked. "Resources," she replied simply. "Applied efficiently." She paused briefly. "Lucas has returned to Dallas. Alone, your wife remains at the hotel. There is uncertainty regarding payment. Even I felt a momentary flicker of surprise at the speed with which alliances dissolved under pressure. Thank you, I said. Reserve gratitude, she replied. Tomorrow brings visibility. Sleep did not come easily. I lay awake, imagining Rachel confronting consequences she had not anticipated, resources withdrawn, support absent, certainty replaced by instability. There was no satisfaction in the image, but there was symmetry. Actions produced outcomes. That principle, at least, remained consistent. Sunday morning delivered further updates. Ethan's photographs showed Rachel at checkout, arguing with staff, her composure fractured. Another image captured her at the airport, alone, carrying a single suitcase, exhaustion etched into her posture. The broader ripple arrived through indirect channels. Social circles shifted quickly when narratives changed. Messages circulated. Reputations adjusted. By midday, Sandra called. Is it true? She asked, voice tight with contained anger. Rachel and Lucas Mercer. Yes, I answered. Our parents are devastated, she said. The photos are everywhere. Olivia Hayes sent them to Emily, and now the entire family knows. Rachel just landed in Houston. She wants to come here before facing you. That's between you and her, I replied, keeping my voice measured and even, the way I might respond to a difficult client determined to redirect a conversation I intended to keep controlled. Right now my focus is on Sophie and on the custody hearing tomorrow. There was a pause on the other end of the line, long enough that I could hear Sandra exhale slowly. Mom mentioned it, she said at last, her tone cautious. Are you really going through with that? Yes. Another silence followed, heavier this time, weighted with reluctant acceptance. She really messed up this time, didn't she? Sandra said quietly. I love my sister, but I don't even know what to say to her anymore. You don't have to say anything, I answered. Just don't lie for her anymore. When the call ended, I stood for a moment with the phone still in my hand, listening to the stillness of the house. Then I opened my email. Ethan's report had arrived. It was meticulous, structured with professional precision. Statements from hotel staff describing Rachel and Lucas's conduct, time-stamped records of their movements. Photographs arranged chronologically, a comprehensive timeline that transformed private betrayal into documented fact. It was organized not as accusation, but as evidence, clear, structured, and courtroom-ready. Robert called next. I've reviewed everything, he said without preamble. We're in excellent shape for tomorrow. Judge Wilson agreed to see us first thing 9 a.m. Understood. Make sure Sophie goes to school as usual, he continued. We don't want her present. She won't be. Based on what we have, Robert said, his voice carrying quiet confidence, I expect the judge will grant temporary full custody while we move toward final settlement. Rachel will likely receive supervised visitation initially. Once the temporary order is entered, we'll move to secure the house and other assets. He paused briefly. Have you heard from Rachel directly? She's called and texted, I said. I haven't responded. Good. Let her first formal communication be through counsel, if she has one. Given the timing, she may appear tomorrow without representation. About an hour later, my phone rang again. Rachel. Against my better judgment, I answered. John, she said, her voice hoarse with exhaustion and strain. Finally, why haven't you been answering me? I've been busy with Sophie, I replied evenly, making sure she's okay despite her mother abandoning her. I didn't abandon her, she said quickly. I just took a short trip. You're her father. You're supposed to take care of her too. A trip you lied about, I said, with your lover while neglecting your daughter. She inhaled sharply. How did you know about Lucas? About your lies? About the break you needed from your family responsibilities, I said calmly. I know everything. Silence followed, stretched thin by tension. It's not what you think, she whispered. It's exactly what I think, I said. I have photographs. I have the video. I have your message telling me not to be jealous. I have everything. Video? Panic crept into her voice. What video? You, at the hotel bar, I replied, my tone steady despite the tightening in my chest. Toasting to husbands who don't ask questions, explaining how I'm safe and dependable, how I'll always be there, while Lucas is your excitement and escape. Another long silence. John, please, she said finally, let me explain. Let me come home, we can talk about this. There's nothing to talk about, I said, and it isn't your home anymore. What are you saying? I'm saying there's a custody hearing tomorrow morning, I replied. 9 o'clock. Judge Wilson's courtroom. I suggest you find an attorney. Custody, her voice rose sharply. You're trying to take Sophie from me because of one mistake. One mistake. My composure wavered, emotion pressing against restraint. You lied repeatedly. You betrayed our marriage. You left your daughter to be with another man. You used our money for hotels, dinners, spa treatments. Then you told me not to be jealous. That isn't one mistake, Rachel. She began to cry openly, her words dissolving into uneven breaths. Please, John, please don't do this. I'll do anything. I'm sorry. I made a terrible mistake. It's over with Lucas, I swear. Just let me come home. For a moment, a brief, fragile moment, I felt hesitation. The sound of her voice, the history we shared, the familiarity of her pleading, it stirred remnants of the life we had built together. But memory returned with equal force. The video, her laughter, her certainty that I would always remain. 9 o'clock tomorrow, I said quietly. Don't be late. I ended the call, placing the phone on the table with deliberate care. My hand trembled slightly. A part of me wanted to call her back, to listen, to negotiate meaning from the ruins. Another part, steadier and colder, understood the cost of reopening that door. That part prevailed. The idea of Rachel standing before a judge, alone, unprepared, emotionally undone, should have brought satisfaction. Instead, it produced something more complex, an uncomfortable flicker of pity. I set the feeling aside. Rachel had acted with intention. The consequences belonged to her. Monday morning arrived, clear and sharp, sunlight cutting clean lines across the quiet house. I wore my best suit, the one Rachel had once helped me choose for important meetings. My parents had Sophie overnight and would take her to school, offering only simple explanations about responsibilities that required attention. The courthouse felt subdued, quieter than expected. Hallways held a restrained energy. Lawyers in dark suits moving with purpose, clerks carrying files, voices lowered in professional restraint. Robert met me outside Judge Wilson's courtroom, his posture relaxed, confidence unmistakable. Rachel's here, he murmured. With her parents, no attorney that I can see. I nodded, maintaining a neutral expression. We entered together, taking seats at the plaintiff's table. I did not turn toward the back of the room. The atmosphere held the formal stillness of proceedings about to begin. Judge Harriet Wilson entered precisely at 9 o'clock. She was composed, deliberate, her steel-gray hair neatly arranged, reading glasses resting low on her nose as she reviewed documents before her. This is a petition for emergency temporary custody, she said, looking up toward Robert. On what grounds are you seeking this extraordinary relief, counselor? Robert rose smoothly. Your Honor, he began, we present evidence that the respondent, Rachel Morgan, left her 6-year-old daughter without proper arrangements to pursue an extramarital relationship. She misrepresented her whereabouts, traveled out of state with her paramour, and demonstrated a pattern of judgment inconsistent with her parental responsibilities. Is the respondent represented by counsel? Judge Wilson asked, lifting her gaze from the file and directing her attention toward the back of the courtroom. No, Your Honor. Rachel's voice was quiet but carried clearly through the still room. This proceeding was arranged without my knowledge. I only learned of it yesterday. For the first time since entering the courtroom, I allowed myself to look at her. Rachel sat between her parents, her usual polished composure replaced by visible strain. Her hair, once meticulously styled, had been pulled into a hurried ponytail that failed to contain loose strands around her face. She wore no makeup, and the absence of it revealed the toll of sleepless nights and emotional exhaustion. Her eyes were swollen and red-rimmed, her skin pale. The navy dress she wore hung loosely, as though she had lost weight in a matter of days. She looked diminished, as if the force of recent events had pressed her inward. Judge Wilson's expression tightened slightly. Mrs. Morgan, these are serious allegations. I strongly advise you to obtain legal representation before proceeding. I understand, Your Honor, Rachel replied, her voice faltering briefly. But I can't afford, she stopped herself, correcting her words with visible effort. I mean, I would like to address these claims today if possible. I don't want to be separated from my daughter. The judge studied her for a moment, weighing practicality against urgency. Very well, Mr. Kane, please present your evidence. For the next 40 minutes, Robert proceeded with deliberate precision. His tone remained calm and professional, each point carefully constructed to build a cohesive narrative. He submitted the text messages Rachel had sent, including the one that had initiated everything. He presented the photographs documenting her time in Miami. He introduced the video from the hotel bar. He provided sworn statements from hotel staff who had observed Rachel and Lucas together. He entered affidavits from my parents attesting to Sophie's care and stability during Rachel's absence. His argument emphasized patterns rather than isolated actions. He spoke of deception, misrepresentation, and prioritization of personal desire over parental responsibility. He outlined financial decisions made without consultation. He framed the situation not as marital conflict, but as a question of judgment affecting a child's welfare. Throughout the presentation, I remained still, my hands resting on the table, my gaze fixed forward. I could feel Rachel's eyes on me, searching, pleading, demanding acknowledgement, but I did not look at her. I had prepared myself for this moment, understanding that composure was its own form of testimony. When Robert played the video from the hotel bar, the sound of Rachel's recorded laughter filled the courtroom, incongruous and jarring in the solemn environment. Rachel released a soft, broken sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Her mother reached for her hand, gripping it tightly. Her father sat rigid, his expression carved into controlled restraint, his jaw set in a line that suggested equal parts anger and humiliation. At last, Judge Wilson turned her attention to Rachel. "Mrs. Morgan, do you wish to respond to these allegations?" Rachel stood slowly, smoothing her dress with trembling hands. She drew a breath before speaking. "Yes, Your Honor. I made a terrible mistake. I lied to my husband about where I was going, and I spent time with someone I should not have been with. I take responsibility for that." Her voice quivered but did not collapse. "But I love my daughter more than anything. I have been her primary caregiver since she was born. John works long hours. He has always been a wonderful provider, but I am the one who takes Sophie to doctor appointments, who volunteers at her school, who knows her friends, her fears, her routines, her favorite stories at bedtime." Her composure faltered briefly as emotion overtook her words. "It was one bad decision, 1 week where I was selfish and thoughtless. That does not erase years of being a devoted mother. Please do not take my daughter away from me." Judge Wilson regarded her carefully. "Mrs. Morgan, the video evidence shows you referring to this relationship as ongoing and describing Mr. Mercer as your escape. That suggests a pattern rather than an isolated lapse in judgment." Rachel's shoulders dropped slightly. "Lucas and I dated in college," she admitted. "We reconnected recently. It was a mistake. A terrible, stupid mistake that I regret more than anything." She turned toward me then, her eyes filled with raw desperation. "John, please don't do this. Not for me, for Sophie. She needs her mother." I did not meet her gaze. My attention remained fixed forward, steady and unmoving. Robert had warned me that emotion would be introduced as argument, that history and shared experience might be invoked as leverage. I remained silent. Judge Wilson removed her glasses and pressed her fingers briefly against the bridge of her nose, as though the weight of decision required physical acknowledgement. "Mrs. Morgan," she said, replacing her glasses, "your candor is noted. However, effective parenting requires consistent judgment. You left your young child to pursue an extramarital relationship, misrepresented your whereabouts, and demonstrated priorities that raise serious concern." She paused, her voice firm but not unkind. "I am granting temporary full custody to Mr. Morgan, with supervised visitation for Mrs. Morgan twice weekly, pending further hearings. Mr. Morgan will retain possession of the family residence to minimize disruption to the child's routine. Mrs. Morgan, I strongly advise you to secure legal representation before the next hearing." Rachel released a quiet, wounded sound, the kind of sound produced when hope collapses in real time. Her mother wrapped an arm around her shoulders, drawing her close. "Court is adjourned," Judge Wilson said. The gavel struck sharp and definitive. Robert shook my hand, his satisfaction evident but professionally contained. "Perfect outcome," he murmured. "Exactly what we needed." I nodded, gathering my documents with measured care. Behind me, I could hear Rachel crying softly, the sound restrained but unmistakable. As we exited the courtroom, Rachel's father approached. Thomas Reynolds had always carried himself with a reserved authority, his approval difficult to earn and rarely expressed. Now he appeared diminished, the lines in his face deeper, his posture less certain. "John," he said quietly. "A moment." Robert hesitated beside me, tension visible in his stance, but I signaled for him to continue ahead. "What do you want, Thomas?" I asked. He glanced over his shoulder toward Rachel, who remained seated with her mother. "She made a terrible mistake," he said, "an unforgivable one. But she is still Sophie's mother. I am aware. Do not use our granddaughter as a weapon," he continued, his voice subdued but urgent. "That is all I ask. I am protecting my daughter from someone who demonstrated she cannot be trusted with a child's emotional stability," I replied. Rachel made her choice. I moved past him without waiting for further response. Outside the courthouse, Robert was already on the phone coordinating filings, securing the judge's order, setting the next procedural steps in motion. I stood on the courthouse steps, inhaling the crisp autumn air. There was no triumph in the moment, no sense of victory, only a quiet certainty that events were unfolding according to necessity. The weeks that followed developed a cautious rhythm. Rachel secured a modest apartment near her parents and began working at her father's company. She attended each supervised visitation with unwavering consistency, bringing small gifts, focusing intently on every moment with Sophie. I observed from a distance, maintaining communication that was civil but minimal, guided consistently by Robert's counsel. Document everything, reveal nothing unnecessary, remain composed. At first, Sophie asked about her mother constantly. Her questions carried confusion and hurt that could not be fully explained in language appropriate for a child. I told her only that her parents were experiencing difficulties and needed to live separately for a time, but that she was loved completely. Gradually, the frequency of her questions lessened as routine established itself. Elsewhere, consequences unfolded with equal inevitability. Olivia Hayes filed for divorce. Lucas's professional standing collapsed with remarkable speed. Without access to former resources, he struggled to regain footing. Their separation became public knowledge, discussed widely within their social and professional circles. Rachel, meanwhile, appeared to retreat inward, her presence quieter, her movements more deliberate, as though each step required renewed effort. The confident, sometimes carelessly self-assured woman I had married became decidedly subdued in the months that followed. Where she had once moved through life with effortless certainty, she now appeared measured and restrained, as though each decision required deliberate caution. Her laughter, once quick and unguarded, grew rare. She retained an attorney, retained with financial assistance from her parents, who negotiated a somewhat more generous visitation schedule than originally proposed. But even with legal representation, she made little progress against the extensive and meticulously documented evidence Robert had assembled. The case had been constructed piece by piece, each detail reinforcing the next, and its cumulative weight proved difficult to counter. 3 months after that text message had fractured everything, our divorce settlement was finalized. The agreement granted Rachel less than she might have received in a conventional dissolution of marriage, yet more than Robert had initially recommended pursuing. I had never intended to dismantle her life entirely. My objective had been protection rather than annihilation. My focus remained fixed on stability for Sophie and safeguarding my own future from further disruption. At the final hearing, while our attorneys processed paperwork in a nearby office, Rachel and I found ourselves alone in a courthouse corridor. The silence between us felt dense, filled with words neither of us initially chose to speak. "I never thought you'd be so ruthless," she said quietly. "In 10 years of marriage, I never saw this side of you. You never gave me a reason to show it," I replied evenly. She studied my face with an intensity that suggested she was searching for something familiar and failing to find it. Was it all an act? The patience, the understanding, the man who forgave everything I did? "No," I answered truthfully. "That was real, but this is real too. You mistook kindness for weakness. That was your miscalculation." Her gaze dropped briefly before returning to mine. "I know I hurt you. I know I betrayed your trust. But did you ever consider why I turned to Lucas? Did you ever wonder if something between us had disappeared? If something was missing," I said, "you should have spoken to me. We could have addressed it together. Instead, you chose deception. You chose betrayal. You chose abandonment. That was not confusion, it was avoidance." She recoiled slightly, as if struck by the bluntness of the words. "And what you did, working with Olivia, cutting off my financial access, pursuing custody so aggressively, that wasn't avoidance. It was strategic," I replied. "And it was effective." At that moment, our attorneys returned, bringing with them the final documents requiring signatures. The conversation ended without resolution. We signed in silence, the formal act of dissolution accomplished with ink and procedure rather than emotion. A decade of shared life concluded with administrative efficiency. That evening, I received an unexpected call from Olivia Hayes. Since the initial court proceedings, our communication had remained infrequent but cordial, limited to brief updates regarding the progress of our respective legal matters. "It's done," she said, a note of composed satisfaction in her voice. "The divorce is final. Lucas receives nothing beyond a modest settlement designed to discourage appeal. And you, also finalized," I replied. "The paperwork was completed this afternoon. Then congratulations are appropriate," she said. "I'm in Austin this weekend for a conference. Perhaps dinner would be an appropriate way to mark the occasion." I paused before responding. Olivia possessed a presence that was both compelling and formidable. Our association had been formed in a moment defined by mutual grievance and aligned objectives, rather than shared values. That origin was not a foundation I wished to extend beyond its original purpose. "I appreciate the invitation," I said carefully, "but my focus is on Sophie right now. Perhaps another time." "Of course," she replied smoothly. "Some opportunities are worth waiting for." After ending the call, I sat alone in the house that had become solely mine. The silence was not oppressive, but it was absolute. The life Rachel and I had constructed together existed now only as memory. What remained was different, more austere, more controlled, and in certain ways simpler. I had lost a marriage but retained self-respect. I had preserved stability for my daughter. I had demonstrated, perhaps most importantly, that loyalty extended freely should never be mistaken for passivity. Later that night, as I tucked Sophie into bed, she asked the question I had known would eventually come. "Daddy, is Mommy ever coming home?" I smoothed her hair gently, allowing myself a moment to gather the words that would neither wound nor deceive. "No, sweetheart, Mommy and Daddy aren't going to live together anymore. But we both love you very much, and we will always be your parents." She considered this quietly before speaking again. Is it because of what Mommy did in Miami? The question startled me. Who told you about Miami? I heard Grandma talking to Grandpa, she said simply. She said Mommy made a big mistake there and that's why you're upset. I chose my response with care. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt people they care about. When that happens, things have to change. But none of this is your fault, and nothing will ever change how much we love you. She nodded slowly, absorbing the explanation in the uncomplicated way only children can. Can I still love Mommy even if she made a mistake? Of course, I said gently. You should love your mom. She loves you very much. Sophie placed her small hand against my cheek. Don't be sad, Daddy. We're going to be okay. Her quiet certainty nearly unraveled me. In that moment, I saw with absolute clarity what had truly been lost, not simply a marriage, but the everyday tenderness that gives life meaning. You're right, I said softly. We're going to be just fine. The final development came 3 weeks later on a rain-soaked November evening. Rachel's attempts to contact me had grown more frequent, her messages increasingly urgent. Yet I had maintained strict boundaries, limiting communication to matters directly concerning Sophie and the legal settlement. That night, she called repeatedly within the span of an hour. Concerned that something involving Sophie might have occurred, I answered, Rachel, what is it? Is something wrong with Sophie? No, she's fine, she said quickly. I just need to talk to you. Please, John, 5 minutes. We have nothing to discuss beyond Sophie's visitation schedule, I replied. My parents are selling their house, she said abruptly. They're moving to Florida. I can't afford my apartment on what I earn at Dad's company, and he says they can't keep supporting me. I need help, John. Just temporarily, until I can get back on my feet. The symmetry of the situation was unmistakable. The stability she had once relied upon, while seeking excitement elsewhere, had dissolved, leaving her without either. That's not my responsibility, I said calmly. Please, she whispered. Where am I supposed to go? How am I supposed to see Sophie if I can't afford to live nearby? You should have considered consequences before you chose to dismantle your marriage, your home, and your financial security, I replied. Actions carry outcomes. You are facing yours. I made a mistake, she insisted. One mistake. How long are you going to punish me for it? Her voice wavered, fragile but demanding, as if she could will my forgiveness into existence simply by asking. I let the silence stretch a moment, letting her feel the weight of her own question. This isn't punishment, I said finally, my tone steady, deliberate. This is reality. You chose what mattered most to you, and now you're living with the consequences of that choice. Her breath hitched, disbelief mixing with fear. I'm going to lose my visitation if I can't maintain a suitable living arrangement. Is that what you want, for Sophie to lose her mother completely? There was an edge of desperation in her voice that I recognized, but the sting of past betrayals dulled it. I hesitated because I'd always prioritized Sophie above all else. Her well-being had guided every decision, every move I had made since discovering Rachel's duplicity. Was cutting Rachel entirely from her daughter's life really what served Sophie best? Or would a structured, limited relationship with her mother be healthier? I'll have Robert draw up an amendment to the custody agreement, I said finally, my voice calm, measured. A small stipend for housing, contingent on your continued employment and strict adherence to the visitation schedule, nothing more. There was no compassion in my tone, but there was fairness. It was a measured solution that protected Sophie while giving Rachel a final opportunity to take responsibility for her own life, without leaving our daughter vulnerable. Thank you, she whispered, almost inaudibly, her pride and anger tempered by need. I don't deserve your help, but thank you. Doing it for you, I replied evenly. I'm doing it for Sophie. Hanging up, I felt a surprising weight lift from my shoulders, a clarity I hadn't anticipated. The anger, the betrayal, the hurt, all the raw emotions that had consumed me, faded into a distant echo, like smoke drifting out of a room. It was no longer a wound that demanded attention, no longer a source of pain I needed to nurse. She had become a problem to manage, a responsibility to guide carefully, but no longer a poison lingering in my life. Later, Rachel went to her parents' house to collect personal items she had left behind, expecting, perhaps, the minimal courtesy of cooperation. Instead, she found a series of cardboard boxes stacked on the front porch, soaked through by the steady autumn rain. Her clothes, her books, her keepsakes, everything she had valued or taken for granted, were packed hastily, abandoned to the elements. The message was unmistakable. Her parents' patience, their long-standing support, had finally reached its limit. Atop the highest box was a waterproof envelope containing 2 items. The first was a copy of our final divorce decree, clearly highlighting the financial settlement that left her with only the bare minimum necessary to survive. The second was a brief note from her father. Choices now live with them. We've supported you through every mistake, every selfish impulse, every poor decision. This time you are on your own. Stood motionless in the rain, watching the water soak through the cardboard, watching the life she had assumed she would always possess literally fall apart around her. She was a woman who had once had everything. An attentive, loving husband, a beautiful child, a comfortable home, financial security, the support of her parents. Now she was alone, stripped of the scaffolding she had relied on for her reckless choices, left with only the consequences she had invited. That evening, as I tucked Sophie into bed, my phone buzzed. A message from Sandra, Rachel's sister. At my place, she's a mess. Parents kicked her out completely, left everything she owns in the rain. She said she texted you, but you didn't answer. My messages, and saw Rachel's desperate plea from hours earlier. Is gone. Parents won't let me in. All my things ruined in the rain. Please help me. I have nowhere to go. Phone aside, deliberately leaving it unanswered. Rachel would survive. She would rebuild. She would learn in the most concrete way possible that the man she had dismissed as safe and dependable was not weak, and that loyalty should never be mistaken for tolerance of betrayal. My focus remained clear. Sophie. I would ensure she had a stable, loving home, one defined by predictability, care, and consequences that taught lessons without fear. I would teach her that actions have consequences, that self-respect is earned, and that choices carry weight beyond immediate gratification. In time, I might allow myself the cautious possibility of opening my heart again to someone who valued strength, consistency, and integrity, rather than mistaking kindness for weakness. Rachel hadn't lost me simply because she went to Miami with Lucas. She lost me because she had assumed my kindness equated to weakness, because she believed my love could be taken for granted without cost. Her greatest error was not the act of betrayal itself, but the misjudgment of my character, the assumption that I would endure any affront without consequence. When wounded, lash out in anger. Some withdraw, carrying their pain silently. The most dangerous are those who go quietly to work, calculating, deliberate, resolute, and entirely capable of transforming betrayal into lessons and boundaries that cannot be crossed. I was in the latter, and in doing so I had reclaimed control, honor,